What's up, bikers? Pierce here with Electric Bike Report, and today we have the Ride1UP Core-5. The Core-5 is a 48-volt, 10.4 amp-hour battery, 500-watt motor e-bike that's designed around a very stealthy frame that at first glance, you can't even tell is an e-bike. With lots of power, speed capability, and a very comfortable geometry, you can use the Core-5 for any commuting or cruiser-related tasks. I like this bike more as an athletic commuter because I have no problem leaning into corners on this thing due to the way it makes me feel confident when riding it. I'm looking forward to showing you all the details on this Ride1UP Core-5, so let's get on with the review. So you briefly heard me mention how this bike is priced around that $1,000 price point. So what are you getting for that $1,000 price point on the Ride1UP Core-5? Well, I'll start out with the electrical components, and let's look at our battery first. This battery is an internal battery that's integrated very nicely, if I do say so myself, and it has 10.4 amp hours and a 48-volt battery. Overall, this battery is pretty good at holding its charge life, but it isn't quite as high amp hourage as we're used to seeing. Given this bike is around $1,000, I didn't really mind, and no complaints about the battery on my end. You also have a rear hub motor with 500 nominal watts of power. This rear hub motor definitely knows how to fly and work hard when it needs to, and I find this motor is perfect for making sure you get up to speed on time without feeling like you got blown off the back of the bike. Other electrical components include our display here, which is going to show you just about everything you need to see when you're out riding. You're going to know how much charge the bike has left, and you're also going to know what pedal assist level you're in, how fast you're moving, and other things such as trip miles. Overall, I think they did a good job giving you the necessary information on the display, and it's also very user-friendly. I don't think any rider is going to have a problem with the interface. Moving on to our other components, let's start out with our drivetrain. On this bike, you have 7 speeds total, which I find is plenty for the speed this bike is able to produce. And that's hooked up to a Shimano Altus derailleur. I've had good luck with this derailleur so far. It seems to stay in line quite well, and I have a very crisp shift when I'm using it. Now, that's hooked up to an over-the-bar thumb shifter, which I personally wish was under the bar. There's nothing wrong with its performance, but just for my personal sake, I like to have the shifter under bar for a little bit more rapid fire shifting. Aside from that, the shifter works quite well, and I think most riders aren't going to have an issue with it, other than perhaps that ergonomic feeling of being under the bar versus over the bar, like what I was telling you about. Moving on to our tires, you have the Kenda Quick 7.5s. These are 2.2 inches wide, and they offer Kenda's K-Shield protection as well, which is perfect for making sure you don't get punctures out there on your ride. Especially with e-bikes where you have to drop out the rear hub motor to fix a flat. You'd rather not deal with it in the first place. And this K-Shield technology seems to do a very good job keeping these puncture-free so you can ride farther without the worry of any flats. These are also pretty grippy tires. They're not blocky tread by any means, but I felt comfortable leaning into corners on these without feeling like I was gonna slide out like on some other tires. So when we're considering everything these tires have to offer, I think they're the perfect tire for this bike. And on top of that, they have a reflective strip here to ensure a little bit more safety to others so they can see you. Your saddle here is a Cell Royale saddle that's very plush, and personally, I don't feel like this saddle really fits the theme of the rest of the bike. Reason being, you'll see a lot of square edges and a lot more geometrical based shapes on your frame here. And then you have kind of a bulbous, rounded off saddle. Now, there's nothing wrong with the saddle's performance. I think it's just fine. But for the sake of visuals, something maybe a little sharper would really tie together this bike for the kind of fighter jet Blackbird vibe it gives me personally. The brakes that come on the Ride1UP Core-5 are Texture disc brakes. They're mechanical, and they have 160 millimeter rotors. The stopping power on this bike is just fine. However, I think upgrading the rotors to 180 millimeters isn't gonna boost the price point up, but it is going to increase your stopping power significantly. Again, there's nothing wrong, and that could very well be a personal preference of mine, but the bigger the rotor, the better in my eyes, especially when a bike is capable of speeds such as 28 miles per hour like this one is here. So just to test out those brakes, we're actually going to do a brake test later in this review. Be sure to stick around for that to make sure that these brakes check all our boxes when it comes to safety and performance. Tying the whole bike together is a 6061 alloy frame that I think Ride1UP has done a very good job of designing. Not only is it visually appealing, it feels nice and stiff below you and like one piece as it should. That comes with water bottle bosses on it, which honestly, I don't see as many of as I'd like to on e-bikes nowadays. Your grips are ergonomically shaped, they're rubber, and when I say ergonomic, I mean they're shaped around the human hand form. It's not your typical cylindrical grip, and that's to your benefit because it's going to distribute the weight of your upper body a little bit more evenly on your palm, reducing numbness overall, making sure you're staying fresh over the period of your ride. You have a lever throttle on the left side that engages decently. I would like a little bit more oomph from the throttle personally, but for those who don't want to feel that initial jolt off of the back of the bike, I think you're really gonna like how this throttle slowly ramps up to top speed. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about is your handlebar. It's a 640 millimeter wide bar that has a little bit of up sweep and back sweep. It's the perfect bar for this bike in the sense it's wide enough for a lot of support, but not so wide you feel like you're raked out over the front of the bike and you're gonna fall off the front. So with the combination of the rise and the width, makes me feel confident on this bike. You continue to hear me talk about confidence, and that's because they've really tied this thing together to make sure you can fly comfortably. So going back to what I initially talked about, what do you get for that around $1,000 price point? I think you get some pretty quality components that have proved to perform quite well so far. You're really going to see how this bike reacts in action later in our review, so make sure you stick around for those tests. Alrighty, so when I think about the handling on the Ride1UP Core-5, I think of a semi-aggressive commuter, but something that's not so aggressive that I feel like I'm falling over the front of the bike. I'm a little more behind the action, which I really like. I like being able to be behind that front wheel a little more, so if I'm going down a curb or just simply going high speed downhill, I feel behind that action versus falling over the top of it. That's partially due to these risen handlebars here, that 640 millimeter width, and just the geometry they've done with the steer tube, raking that fork out a little bit more than you see on some commuter-oriented bikes. Because of this, I think a lot of riders are gonna find themselves more comfortable at high speeds than they would if they're hunched over the front of the bike. Going along with that topic, these bars also really help with the comfort on those longer rides as well, so you can ultimately feel fresher, which leads to more speed overall, even if the positioning isn't quite as aggressive as some other commuters. Overall, I think they've done a very good job with the way they've created this bike and the way it handles. Because of that, this is one of my favorites just to ride around on my lunch break. It was apparent that the Ride1UP Core-5 wasn't going to shatter any distance records, as it uses a decently lightweight 48-volt 10.4 amp-hour battery. To get an idea of how long the 10.4 amp-hour battery would last, we rode using full assistance while pedaling the whole time. After just over an hour, we reached 21.58 miles with a quick average speed of 21.3. While the Core-5 isn't going to go as far as some other e-bikes, it's going to be at the head of the pack when it comes to average speed. We also tested the Core-5 on the lowest assistance level to get a better understanding of the true range and battery life of the Core-5. After 46.14 miles, the battery finally died with an average speed of 13.6 miles per hour. Alrighty bikers, we've made it to our hill climb test. This hill has an average grade of 12% and is about 1/3 of a mile long. This hill is gonna tell us a couple things. One, how good of a climber and how powerful this Core-5 is, and also how it responds to putting this motor under a lot of stress. I'm going to be doing two different tests, one with throttle only and the other with me pedaling in maximum pedal assist level 5. Between these two results, we'll be able to tell how this bike performs on its own and when you're helping it on the maximum assistance level. We'll compare those times, average speeds, and overall thoughts, and get back to you with our results. Alrighty guys, so I just finished up the hill climb test. One test throttle only, the other on maximum pedal assist. So when I did the throttle only, I got up the hill in 1 minute and 33 seconds, which is actually a lot faster than we're used to seeing on the throttle. I had an average speed of 11.7 miles per hour, and I dipped down to around 6.5 miles per hour at my lowest, which is still about twice as fast as some of these other bikes that we see. When it comes to the pedal assist level 5, I got 1 minute and 18 seconds, which isn't about the middle of the pack for times that we've got on this hill so far, and I had an average speed of 13.9. On that test, I dropped down to around 10 miles per hour at the lowest, and overall it felt like it handled the hill very well. Yes, there's been bikes that go up faster, but when it comes to the combination of the throttle only time and the pedal assist level 5 time, this is a very solid package overall when it comes to the hill climbing capability. If you're fried after a long day at work and you have a couple of hills before you get home, feel free to hit that throttle. Chances are it's gonna get up the hill just fine. And I was quite impressed with the way this bike was able to hold on to its speed when I was just using the throttle. This bike wants to roll is kind of my main takeaway. It doesn't lose its speed, and that's probably due to the fast rolling Kenda Quick tires and also the way this bike is set up to only be 49 pounds total. With all of that being said, let's move on to our next test. So at this point in the review, you've heard me talk about how this bike handles, you've seen it climb some hills, and you probably have a good idea of the performance of this bike overall. Now, how does that add up into a 1 mile loop where we do everything from hill climb to stopping on corners to accelerating back up to speed? So we figured that out with our circuit test, which was 1.04 miles. When I pedaled this bike completely off, I averaged 13.9 miles per hour, which is cruising decently well considering this is a almost 50-pound e-bike turned completely off. When I went up to that first assistance level, I went to 16.3 miles per hour. So about a 2.5 mile per hour jump between this bike being completely off and that first assistance level. Jumping from assistance level 1 to 2 was about 1 mile per hour, but the jump from 2 to 3 was a lot bigger. That was another 2.5 mile per hour jump. Jumping into those higher assist levels, we really started to see this bike take off. My jump from pedal assist level 4 up to 5 was about 3 miles per hour, and I averaged that 1 mile circuit test at 24.9 miles per hour. That's one of the faster bikes we've seen, and test after test, we've been very impressed with this bike overall. Alrighty, so now we're to our brake test, where we see how fast the Core-5 can stop with its 160mm mechanical disc brakes from Tektro. With a bike like this, where you're going to be on the asphalt around cars, kids, pretty much a lot of things that could jump in your way quickly, it's important to know that you can stop on time. So that's what we're going to figure out with 5 different brake tests, all from 20 miles per hour. And then we're gonna take the average of those stopping distances and let you know what those are. So I am actually quite impressed with the performance on these Core-5's brakes. These 160 millimeter Tektro disc brakes, they're mechanical, so I was expecting pretty average stopping distances overall. What we got was actually 14 feet and 3 inches as our average, which is a lot better than we're used to seeing. I'm thinking this is due to the weight of this bike being only 49 pounds. There isn't as much rotational mass for this thing to really slow down, like with a big fat tire e-bike, for example. Like I mentioned, stopping distance is very important for a lot of reasons. You don't want to run into something if it jumps out in front of you. And I would say these brakes are definitely confidence inspiring with the performance they've yielded with us so far. All of those tests, I was just around 20 miles per hour, and we actually redid one of the tests because we weren't sure.
Way you're going 20 miles per hour. The bike should not be able to stop this suddenly.
If the results are like this, these are some of the best brakes we've seen for a bike at this price point.
Can we just stop screwing around? Just make sure we get accurate results for the viewers. Come on, Pierce. On the top. Let's do it again.
No, turns out this bike can stop on a dime, and I'm really happy to see that, considering the amount of speed this bike is able to produce. Alrighty guys, it's been a really fun day testing the Ride1UP Core-5, and overall, I'm very impressed with the results we've received from testing this bike, especially for the price point that it's listed at. I think Ride1UP is doing a stellar job giving the consumer an awesome bike at a really good price point. One of the things that stood out the most to me was the way these 160 millimeter mechanical disc brakes worked so well. Me and Bryce, we had a little bit of a talk because he didn't think I was actually stopping from 20 miles per hour on this bike, when in reality, these brakes actually work very well for this bike. And when you are gonna be taking this bike around town and there is potentially something that could jump out in front of you, that's important. Other than that, a few of the things that stood out to me were the way the throttle was able to hold onto its power so well, even when our hill got steep during our hill test. Yeah, the range on this bike isn't as big as some of the other bikes, but some of those other bikes, you pay for it in looks. Sure, you might get more miles on this bike, but that bike also is going to have a big old battery pack battery on it, while this is very low profile, and it takes more than one look at it to really even tell that it's an e-bike overall. As far as overall cons, I don't really think there is any with this bike, and if I'm getting nitpicky, I would change up the saddle to fit the aesthetics of the rest of this bike a little better. You're gonna see a lot of sharp geometrical edges on the bike, but the saddle here is very rounded off. Sure, it works well, but just when it comes to really tying together this bike, I think you would have a little bit more of a good looking bike if the saddle matched the rest of the bike well. When I look at this bike, I kind of think of a stealth fighter jet. It's quiet, it's fast, and it's low profile. These are all things I personally look for in an e-bike, and I also like the feeling of being able to ride the bike first and feel that assistance second, and that's one thing that the Core-5 does well. With all of that being said, I hope you guys know a little bit more about this bike now, and hopefully I've helped you guide your decision on seeing if the Core-5 is right for you. With that being said, my name is Pierce with Electric Bike Report, and I really appreciate you watching. I have a more detailed written review in our description below, and I want to hear from you guys in the comments about what you think of this bike and of our reviews overall. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and with all of that, I'll see you next time.